Hello, hello, welcome to another Epic Understanding chat. Water cooler. So today we're going to
Yes.
talk about systematic equity in the workplace. So Erica, I'll leave you with the leading conversation.
All right. Awesome. All right. So welcome to Epic Understanding Water Cooler Chat That Matters. And who's joining us at the water cooler today is Ben Eubanks, Lucic, and Sean Fogel. Yes. So say hello, everyone. Say hello. And
Hello.
there are some other people that might drop by the water cooler today just to spend a little bit of time with us. But the experts that are hanging out today, they're going to help us with how to navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my first question is for Ben. Aren't we reaching the diversity goals in business already? So why are we acting like there's an issue here?
Goodness. So the way I put it in the last year is you ask any CEO, is diversity important? Which one of them is going to say no? Which one of them is going to say, no, that doesn't matter to us? But the real challenge comes to the actual implementation of that. Right? How is that actually rolling out? That's Sean. We were chatting before we even started recording. Sean does this with organizations, right? He helps them because people talk about it, but then they have no idea how to actually execute and make their workplace more inclusive. And I'm hoping in the conversation today we can dig into some of those things, because organizations for a long time has focused on hiring as their only lever, as their only way of solving that problem. And some of them even do a really great job of hiring and bringing in this very diverse talent pipeline. And then they leave them capped off right there, and they never have a chance to advance to other layers of leadership in the organization, never have a chance to show what they can do, never have a chance to really have an impact at a greater level. And that is a disservice. That disrespects the value they bring to the organization. And we're missing a huge opportunity. We all know the research shows that having a more diverse organization leads to better outcomes, but they're not talking about we're homogenous up here and diverse at the very bottom rungs. You're missing out on the value that can bring.
Sean, what input do you have on that?
Well, Ben, again, you said a mouthful just in those last probably 90 seconds. So as you said, one of the things that I always ask organizations from the beginning is show me your mailroom to the boardroom plan. And what I mean by that is, hey, you know what? If I sent you the perfect candidate who was full of vigor and enthusiasm, could you show me your show me your life cycle development for that employee to take them from, an entry-level employee to where they're actually part of your succession planning. And, sadly, most companies don't. Again, like you said, do a great job of assembling a team, but it's almost like we're in a huddle, or not even a huddle, because a huddle is more orderly. It's almost like a gaggle where everyone just kind of shows up, and you think that, we're going to sprinkle this magic fairy dust and all of a sudden create these great leaders. And it just does not work that way. It has to be a deliberate plan. However, the deliberate planning cycle, it just does not happen. When I was at Citibank, one of the things that we used to do every year was we had our book of talent, where we looked at every single organization within Citi, and we said, okay, within those organizations, we talked about this thing called trap talent. And, that was one of the things where everybody kind of looked at me the first time I said it, at Citi. And what I meant was, we're so focused on recruiting externally when there are employees who are knocking it out the box every single day. And how many of those employees do we say, you know what, I can see him, her, there. And we need to make a deliberate plan on how to get them there. And so when they get there, not only, are they equipped to thrive, to survive, but also equipped to thrive and become, a force multiplier within the organization.
Okay, I'm going to go to Lucic in a moment, but I want to just hover on what has been said so far, because there is a lot there to unpack. And Lucic, I want to get your opinion before you start directing us towards some answers. What I heard Ben say is very simply, we are hiring in great talent, but then we are not elevating them to the levels to where they can actually affect the company, giving them a voice at the table. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
And then what I'm hearing Sean say is that we have trapped talent. And I just want us to kind of consider that for a moment. What happens when that occurs? We actually get a frustration in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
If we do that, what we're doing is we're creating a frustrated culture. And all of you guys know that a bad attitude is more contagious than the flu.
Yes. And
so
and then, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doc.
Go ahead. But my point is, it is not going to, it is not just going to stay with, your diverse culture. It's not going to stay in a box. What's going to happen is it's going to flow throughout the organization, and it's ultimately going to frustrate progress and initiative.
Well, yeah, because what ends up
Lucy,
happening is, and Lucy, I know you have some stuff to say, but the point that I really want to make real quickly is that's a perfect example of how the perception becomes the reality of that employee, because their perception becomes, you know what? I just don't see where I fit in to this puzzle. I don't see where I, am valued as an employee. So their reality becomes that they're expendable. So what ends up happening is you never get past, that surface level buy-in to that corporation, to where that employee feels their intrinsic value, to where they're willing to go above and beyond for that organization.
Absolutely. Lucic, please give us your thoughts on this particular matter.
So I see in the chat, Tony Alexander just brought up something that I was about to say, which is retention. So we're getting them to the door, but who's staying? So we're getting all these people of color or diverse folks to the door, but we don't have any ways for them to stay. We didn't build any structures for them. So we're getting them for tokenism. We're getting them for those beautiful pictures to say we have diverse folks, right? Let's be honest. But we don't have any systems for them. We don't have any ways for them to feel like they belong. We get them into the door, but in meetings they feel like they can't speak up, or they're stuck under supervisor that just doesn't know how to supervise them and keeps enforcing white dominant culture on them. So all these diverse folks keep leaving, so they keep hiring yet another POC. So of course, folks keep leaving. Oh,
Sorry.
I was saying something so great that it needed to happen again.
There you go. I love it.
So of course, now the rate of hiring POC is really high at the corporation because they need to hire a replacement POC or diverse folks, but they're not tracking how many people have left. So everything Ben and Sean are saying is absolutely on point. Yes, we're hiring people because we know diverse people enrich the culture. Or in some cases, companies are hiring them because they have to hire them. Especially Black Lives Matter, I think, kicked everyone's booty, all the companies, and they feel like they have to. And now all the DEI folks that they fired, now they have to fill those positions again, and now they're filling them with people of color, but they don't give them any resources. They're not giving them any financial support. They're not giving them any work groups. They're not giving them anything to be able to want to stay at the organization, and they're not giving them a pathway to actually be able to get to a role of leadership. So that's my opinion.
My guy Tony, my guy Tony says they are on the hamster wheel. that's where they are. And I want to thank everybody who's watching on LinkedIn and YouTube, Facebook. So I appreciate you. Keep those comments coming. But I want to point out that hamster wheel is very expensive. That is an expensive hamster wheel. We have that money is not going towards the bottom line. It is not going towards promotions, and it is not going towards training. So that means you're spending a lot of money on recruitment. I mean, let's face it, ads cost money. Onboarding someone costs money. And so instead of spending that money on something that doesn't lift up your organization's reputation or culture, let's be proactive. Let's be smart about it. Ben, what are your thoughts? You're a human resource guru.
I actually got a data point popped in my head as you're sharing that. Not only are there costs to replacing someone, right? There's a cost in hiring the next person, training them, all the other things, but there's actually some research that shows when you hire from outside the organization, there's a risk there. That person doesn't know the processes. They don't know the right connections. It takes time to learn those things. And some of the research from Wharton shows that when you hire someone, they cost up to 20% more and they perform worse on the job for the first 2 years on average. So we're not only paying on one end, we're paying on the other in terms of grabbing someone outside instead of saying, hey, you know what? Sean's been a great contributor. He's hit all of his goals in the last 2 years. He is on that. He's got the fire in his belly. He's going to be a great leader one day. Let's help prepare him for that role and move him into that. Instead, like, no, we'll go find someone else because they surely we can find that perfect candidate out there in the world out there, right? I don't know why every hiring process starts like that, because no one's yet found that perfect candidate, but they always think they're going to. And they skip over that internal person who has the right capabilities, has the right qualifications. We actually did a study last year on how employers are hiring and thinking about the reskilling that's going to be needed for automation in the workplace and all that other kind of fun stuff. Put my nerd hat on for a second there. And one of the things that stuck out to me is that in that study, we asked Black employees about their training, how they felt about moving in their roles. 8 out of 10 Black employees have left the job because they did not see a career path ahead of them. But almost all of them said, if they had just shown me a path, shown me a journey I could have taken, I would have stayed.
Absolutely. Now, what are some of the things, Lucic, that you've seen companies do well in order to solve some of these issues and concerns?
Yeah. So one company comes into mind and one solution, and this is something that I've seen has been debated. And Marco, if it's possible, I would like to share the screen. Just gonna go ahead.
It's coming.
Hey, there's our guru producer. Hey, Marco. Everybody give Marco a round of applause.
Absolutely, he makes it happen.
Marco, am I okay to share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I want to talk to you all about transparent salaries, because this is something that we know, like, this is not a secret. We know that there is pay disparity between people of color and white folks. And we know there is pay disparity between women and men. And we know that Black women tend to get paid the least, right? So we know this is happening, but it's hard to figure out a way out of it. So, for example, for myself, if I'm at a job, it's hard for me to figure out how to negotiate better salary because I don't know how someone else in my position got paid before, or how someone else is getting paid in my position if there's a male counterpart. So pay equality is something that definitely needs to be solved, and that's one way to for companies to get started with this DEI initiative. And obviously, like, a clear way to support our POC and Black communities and women, right? So Buffer is an organization that's known for this, because they have absolute transparent salary. So if you go to their website, you can actually look up everyone's salary every year. So you can see how anyone in their organization, how they're getting paid and how that's based. So they first look at cost of living and what the person's position is. And they have even the names of the people. And if everyone can see, you can even see the salaries. And you can go at the end and you can see the cost of the living associated with it. And I also want to show you that if you go to their website, Buffer, they actually offer you a formula to be able to calculate this for your own organization. So they walk you through this step by step, how to do cost of living, how to calculate other factors, how to do locations, how to do everything. So they are definitely looked at as controversial in a way because you can literally see the people's names. But there's definitely other ways of approaching this, which is, okay, you're an employee, you are looking at salary. Can you look at the salary of the person that had the position before you? That's one way, right? Can you look at the salary of the person that's in the same position as you? So there are different ways of approaching the salary piece of it. And I would be actually quite interested in Ben's perspective in this as an HR person. But this is one way for us to approach this big gap that we have. And we know this is taking place. Like, we know this is taking place. And Buffer is just one organization that found their way of approaching it. But there is a way to solve this. And there is a way, they're showing a way. Yeah.
I want to throw it to Ben, but I'm going to throw you two balls at once, Ben. Because I want to say that there was a Harvard review that says not only should there be transparency in salaries when we are hiring people in, but specifically with referrals, that companies ought to be doing referral audits compared to, not just black to white or men to women or anything like that. We should be taking a strong look at the salaries of the people that we refer in based on the whole organization, because there is a disparity there as well.
Goodness. So broadly talking about I'll start juggling
We're making it hard
here.
for you, Ben.
I'm going to juggle. So broadly, the concept of transparency is very critical because it leads to trust. It leads to a better relationship overall. Right? In any part of your life, ignore work for a second. In any part of your life where you're not transparent, where there is no trust, that's really hard to have a relationship. And so, from a workplace context, the research over the years has been varied. In general, transparency is good. A buffer is this very far outlier that most companies, if you said tomorrow, I'm going to make all of your pay immediately available on the internet, that would cause untold amounts of chaos for those companies trying to figure out how to sort through it, because everybody's going to look at who's above me, who's below me, and start rationalizing why those things are. And it's the way that I have advocated for this for many years, though, is let's push towards transparency. Let's take where we are. We can always be making incremental steps towards more transparency. And one of the ways we do that is helping hiring managers, helping leaders in the organization simply know how to talk about, hey, this is our pay structure. Here's what it's based on. Lucic, for you to go from a 1 to a 2 on this scale, here's what it's going to take. Here's the things that we're looking for. But most leaders we know, right, and Sean probably can tell us some good stories, are not equipped to do that. They're not equipped to have those conversations, or they want to, someone else can talk about that because I don't feel comfortable with it. So they stay away from it. And they're missing an opportunity to really connect with that person, to show them. And they're asking you, how do I get better and be more valuable? And you have a chance to tell them. And leaders often kind of skirt the issue because they're worried about hurting someone's feelings, instead of just telling them, this is the thing that I need from you. This is what it's going to take for you to advance. And then you open up those conversations and you can really have a good dialogue there.
I would say,
Very nice.
Sorry. One thing with the scale, even the scale though, has a gray area, because even in the scale, you can negotiate which portion of the scale you end up in. So that's something to still keep in mind, that like as a woman of color, I can start at scale 1 and not think about that I could have negotiated, or not know that I have a power, or just not have that power to negotiate to be in scale 3, while someone else in the same position would end up in scale 3.
For sure. There's got to be that dialogue there, right?
I have 2 questions with that. Does equity mean that everything is, precisely level? Okay, so that's one thought. But I want to throw this to Sean, because I know you have a lot of government experience. I think that the government approaches this particular idea in a similar way that Lucic is suggesting, because you're GS1, GS2, and the salaries are published. They are what they are. That's right. Just what they are.
Yeah. And again, so I go back to a couple of points. First of all, I want to take my hat off to my former employer, Citibank, simply because a couple of years ago, what they did was they did basically a women's pay equality adjustment, where Mike Corbett, who's getting ready to leave as the CEO, and he's actually turning it over to, I forget her name, but Citi's getting ready to have their first women CEO in history. What they did a couple of years ago, they realized, you had Citibank, kind of, as you get towards your upper levels, it goes by C level. So, for example, you would have a C14, which is a senior vice president. There's no reason why you're going to have a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 pay gap between, say, a male and a female of similar, time with the bank, similar skills, things like that. And that's one of the things that I think, probably gets a lot of these companies, into hot water. There's no reason why that pay band should be that wide at any given level. If that's the case, then I think you probably need another level. But I think what's happened is, under I'm not going to say good old boy system, but, some folks probably have empirically wanted to take care of their friends. So they probably expanded that pay band out just a little bit more, because, say, for example, you can only have so many vice presidents or associate vice presidents or senior vice presidents, in any given organization. So what do? Sean, I can't make you, a senior vice president, but I can throw you more money as a vice president. Now I'm a vice president making senior vice president money simply because the organization, doesn't have the title, so to speak, to give me. And when I walked into the bank, the first thing I said was, I would rather be the janitor getting paid like the president as opposed to the president getting paid like the janitor. So just get my check right has always been my mantra since I retired, from the Air Force, because again, I as I said, I've had a great career, in my last career. Now I'm decided kind of having fun and making a living to pay for some of these expensive habits that I have. But, going back to what you were saying, within the government system, it's very rigid. Okay, I don't care who you are, what color, it doesn't matter. A Martian can come down, and get a job, working at the Department of Energy. If he's a GS-10, guess what? He's going to get paid GS-10 pay. Doesn't matter whether or not he's a male, female, those type things. So I think it has, built in some equities within the system. But again, there's so many protections that are built in for working for, whether it's the federal government or even a lot of local governments, that they know that the cost of litigation, would be outrageous if they didn't do, what they were supposed to do. So that was one point, that I wanted to make. Going back to something that Luke said earlier, one of the things that I want to, in case Kay Wakeham, my former colleague, is on here, one of the things that she came up with was a great idea that we kind of fanned out across city, was having those stay conversations as HR. Once you figure out who your talent is that you want to keep, at some point, you got to let those people know. So whether it's at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, you got to have that conversation and say, hey, you know what, Ben? I want you to know that what you've been doing matters and you have been knocking it out of the park. Having said that, we want you to know that we value you, and we're going to set up an IDP, some sort of individual development plan to get you to that next level, because we see you as that sort of, employee where you're a part of the future of this organization. Have those conversations. I've never understood why, companies refuse to let people know how valuable they are until either they show up and say, as Lucy will probably know, they show up and say, hey, I've got another offer. All of a sudden, so what's the offer? We can match it. Well, if you're willing to match it, then what that means is you've been kind of underpaying me before, so now I'm even hotter. Should we? So why should we have to have, this conversation? Have those and it's a 5-minute conversation. How hard is it to tell me, Sean, I value you, I value what you do, and are you ready to go to the next level? And that's another question. You have to make people's goals and what they're willing to put forth part of that conversation, because you know what? You may have some people who you see as next level, but they're not necessarily looking for whatever reason, whether it's personal, for different reasons, they may not be wanting to move, which, so I was a global program manager at City, and I had, folks that work with me all around the world who, were phenomenal talents. And, me being in the military for 25 years, all I've known is every couple of years, a truck shows up, picks up all my stuff and move along. So, in my mind, I couldn't figure out, well, hey, you know what? I've kind of arranged for all these, different opportunities around the world. And people are saying, I don't want to move. You have to be accepting of that as well. But again, even if an employee has no drive, or shall I say no, desire to move to a next level or somewhere else, you cannot believe the amount of capital that you will build within that employee by having that conversation. Because I'll tell you what they do. The same way employees tell other employees when the company's doing bad, imagine, other employees having that conversation saying, man, Erica, Ben came to talk to me today. And even though I wasn't looking to move, they at least let me know that they recognize, excellence, and that if I wanted to move, that there was some place, there was a plan in place. So, definitely. And, the last thing I'll touch on is one of the biggest keys that, I had available to my use is all leaders have within, the U.S. Air Force is this thing we call the CFETP. And I was just talking to one of my former colleagues last night and saying, never have 5 letters made me so much money, as a consultant. It's the career field education and training plan. Now, I don't know that we do enough, or the Air Force does enough as far as throwing resources in the form of tangible development opportunities at it. But I'll tell you, from cradle to grave, where an airman can see walking into the Air Force my first day to walking out 30 years later. Here are some of the, the road, the guideposts that I can see where the Air Force has got my targeted development. So I know it costs a lot of money and it's a lot of time, but it's something that we really as organizations need to put, a lot of effort, or just even the minimal amount of effort will yield you great results. So definitely, going back to what you said, as far as, making sure that there's that path where people can see, Lucy, and then, making sure that there's some sort of equity built into that. And it doesn't always have to line up, but it should be within one standard deviation either way of each other. You can't continue to have folks making $20,000, $30,000 difference doing the same job. That kills morale. And again, it just breeds so much distrust. And when you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to put names, like the other company did, but at least say, hey, for this pay grade, this is the range. That you've done more than enough, because folks can now see, okay, am I somewhere in the range? Okay, if I'm a top performer, the first thing, now I have a valid argument. You've been telling me I'm a top performer, but why am I getting, lower quadrant or middle of the road type money? And maybe that's one of the reasons why companies are less apt to do it.
You know what? So I want to acknowledge everything that you guys have said here, because it is so valuable. I hope the audience, live and replay, is sitting with a pen and paper and pulling together this knowledge, because there are so many small businesses out there who really don't have the infrastructure available to really research these kinds of practices. And I have the experts at the water cooler here today. We even have an expert in the audience, Tony Alexander. He is burning it up in the comments.
Yes.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Wait a minute. The best comment that he made so far, it is not an expert comment, but it's coming from an expert. He said, "Get my money right." That's right. At the end of the day, get my money
Just
right.
Get my check
Show
right.
me that appreciation.
That's my hashtag. Just get my check right. That's all. You have the happiest employee in the world. I'm telling you, ready to run through a brick wall every morning. Yeah, that's all I ask. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think really at the heart of that comment is get my money right, but really get my currency right. I want my accolades, my appreciation, my acknowledgement, my seat at the table, and the zeros on my paycheck. I want all of that currency, and I want it right.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course, that is what every employee is asking for. But what we're pointing out in this conversation is that companies are really struggling to get it right with a particular part of their infrastructure that they're paying for, and that could do a lot more for the company than they are allowing them to do. One of the things that Tony pointed out that I want to cover is the area of perks and bonuses, and that we need to watch out for those. So I am going to throw it out to Ben. What are some of the best structures for organizations to set forth for perks and bonuses?
I think the biggest thing so far, again, I'm making notes over here too, because I'm learning from Lucic and Sean in this conversation and having a ton of fun. But one of the things that keeps coming up over and over is you've just got to be intentional about this. Right? We've got to decide that we're going to do this and make it a priority, and not say that's important and then we'll focus on it later. We'll come back around and check if we hit it. You're not going to hit a goal you think about once and then come back to a year later. Mm-hmm. And so as you're thinking about, right, the bonus piece of that, one of the things that we used to do is when we'd run bonuses, we'd have, hey, managers get to assign some of those. They get some control over that. But then we come back together as a leadership team and we say, okay, we're going through this. Hey, wait a minute. Like, all of the men in this group got 30% more than the women. We're going to have a conversation about that. And sometimes it's just I didn't realize, right? Or there was a justification. These people are part-time, they're full-time. Like, there's a way to have that conversation. But that became a priority, and they knew every year, like, someone's going to look at this after I do it. And so it wasn't just something, a token thing or something that we used our words, but it was an action, and we followed up on it and we made it a priority. So every year our leaders knew pay raises, bonuses, anything related to compensation changes, that we were coming back to them. And so they felt more accountability for it. It goes, goodness, I can't remember if it was Lucic earlier or Sean that said, it's not just telling someone they're accountable for it, but giving them the resources to actually be able to do that. And it's resources, it's tools, it's education, whatever they need to be able to make sure they can handle that. Part of it might be just helping them to know this is how our policy works. This is how we make these decisions. Right? And we heard some really good nuts and bolts ideas from Sean on that. The other thing that Lucic pointed out earlier, all the data say that there are disparities when you have a chance to negotiate, because women are less likely to in general, and people of color are less likely to in general, and that compounds a negative effect. If we shorten those bands up, like Sean was saying, we have a chance to make sure that is more equitable. There can't be this huge disparity if we're not giving you a $10,000 window, we're giving you a $2,000 window to choose from. And suddenly that make sure it's more even. So again, I'd love to hear if there's anything else the team wants to share on the perk side of that. But in terms of just the bonus piece, we always tie that in with compensation. And that was always something we looked at as a leadership team. And the managers knew that they were on the hook for what they said. So we would come back to them, and they didn't know if we were going to follow up or not. Sometimes we made the changes and just told them after the fact, but we made sure that was something we actually focused on and made a priority. And what's interesting, our people didn't know that. We didn't announce that to the employees. They weren't aware of that. But if you were in a leadership role, you knew that the compensation review board's meeting next week, and they're going to look at what you're doing and make sure that you're doing the right things by your people, so that we not just stay compliant and all the other fun stuff, but that we're treating them like the resources, the valuable assets they are to the business.
So then you just said something that really.
All right, I just got to stop, because just stop one moment. Stop 1 moment. I have to pause you guys. Because I can't let Ben get away with saying what he said and not, tell everybody to grab their tea. Okay, grab your tea, your coffee, and your water, and swallow on this one. Ben pointed out, and he said that minorities, people of color, and women fail to negotiate, and thereby compounding the problem. That needs to stop. And the reason why, because it is in the hand of the end user. It's in the employee's hand. So that can stop today. You can control it. And I just want to say, we shall cover this. We shall empower you, audience. I'm going to get us some experts on here to help us understand how to negotiate, when to negotiate, and what information we should use in our approach to get a higher salary. That is extremely important, because when the ball is in your court and you refuse to shoot, well, then what do you want me to do? You know, go ahead, Sean.
No, but you know what? No, let me tell you something. Ben has said a mouthful, and I totally agree. Going in or out of different organizations, here's what I have found, not necessarily in every instance, but in enough to where this is a conversation needs to be had. Okay, a lot of employees of color are fearful to have those conversations simply because here's what they find. Well, shoot, it was hard enough for me to get here in the first place. So now if I have a conversation where I'm asking for more money, they're going to get rid of me. You know, number one. Number two, you know, so let's say, for example, you know, you could see two alpha male men, not of color, two white guys, they can go at it, having a conversation. It becomes viewed as a very passionate conversation. Now add color to one of those characters. All of a sudden, it becomes antagonistic. Now there's this conversation of greedy versus being assertive, you know, non-appreciative versus, you know, knowing what your worth is. So there's an entire conversation that needs to be had, you know, as to how that conversation is perceived by the person in power. I mean, let's just be honest, because, you know, a lot of times those conversations are not, you know, viewed, you know, the way that, you know, you could go to Ben with AI. You know, I've known Ben probably for about an hour and a half now, and I know that, you know, the way that Ben's on this podcast is the same way that he governs and he leads. However, Ben's been honest enough about a whole lot of stuff to where Ben knows that that conversation is not going to go over well in a lot of different areas, not just some, in a lot of different, you know, conversations. And then one of the other things that I wanted to bring up is building that calibration session into the bonuses and that conversation, because, you know, and what that calibration session does is it makes sure that all of the managers, I'm not saying we all have to give our employees the same thing, but again, going back to that one standard deviation above and below, when I look at what a person is being judged by, you know, it's almost like, you know, I look at promotion boards when I was in the military. You know, there were 3 people sitting at that table, and we had to be within basically a small window of what we thought of somebody's accomplishments. So, you know, you can't have, you know, the person who's a tyrant that, you know, well, John came to work late on the first day of the reporting period, so therefore he's getting no bonus 364 days later, you know, as opposed to, you know, you got, you know, Tom who's sitting here and all John did was he came in and did his job. Now you want to give him the biggest bonus, you know, in the pot. So having that calibration, you know, session where you bring these managers in and you show them, okay, this is what fair and equitable looks like. I don't care how you apply it, you know, or to who you apply it. When we look at it, you know, everyone can say, you know what, I see why this person either did get this or didn't get that. And I don't know that enough organizations building that calibration session where they do what I call a trial run of, okay, we're going to award these bonuses. Now defend your position.
Awesome. Listen, I'm going to watch this on the replay myself. I'm going back to watch this on the replay, because there's definitely things I want to go over, unpack, and revisit. But we are headed into the last part of the show, and I just can't. I can't leave our audience without asking this question. All right. You can't cheat off of one another. I'm polling you one at a time. No, I got to poll everybody at the same time. Okay, here we go. This is the question, because I don't want anybody to, you know, copy off your answers. I just want to know, and audience, let me know what you think. Raise your hand or say aye if you think that diversity and inclusion should be a part of human resources. Lucy, you go, girl. You get out of here. She's like, no.
Lucy's her whole face changed. Yeah, I got to hear this.
I know my answer clearly. I don't
We weren't clear on
need
that
to
one.
think.
Look, and Ben's like, I'm a human resources guru. I don't know.
I can make a case for and against, right? I see it like ethics almost, where it needs
Direct
to report
reporting.
to
It's a
direct
direct
report
reporting
to
agency.
leadership, because you can shortcut any other sort of thing that might, you don't have the position authority to make that happen. If you report directly to the CEO, you have no other choice but you have one person that you can report to, and one person that can either say yay or nay on any sort of decision. And they can, if you need the resources, guess what? There's no better person to authorize that. But if you're stuck in HR in this little subset and you've got to compete with, the learning team for their budget and the recruiting team for their budget, you're going to get whatever scraps are left over. Even if the company does say DE&I is important to us, DEI is a critical piece, even then you're still going to compete with other pieces of that budget instead of having it carved out, standalone, so you can find ways to add value. One other fun thing, by the way, I didn't mean to start this, I'm sorry, but one other fun thing, I just had a conversation recently with the team at Takeda Pharmaceuticals, their HR team for North America, and one of the things they've started doing, their recruiting team, there's a lady there named Dominique Brewer. She's amazing. Erica, you should have her on, by the way. One of the things that they have started doing is she is advising other parts of the business on how to think about DEI outside of HR and talent. So when we're picking a supplier for the business, how do we think about that? We're doing a clinical trial for a drug test.
Yes.
Do we have the right people in this audience to make sure we have a drug that's going to come out that's going to serve everyone, not just this population? So they're thinking about that in broader ways, and it's a brilliant way of using them as a resource for the rest of the business.
Excellent. Ben, you still didn't tell us yes or no.
No, I said no. I said let's directly report to the CEO. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. I love it. Sean, what say you?
So I'll go next because I want Lucy to be our closer because she's got, I see it on her face. I can't wait. But, I think it should be a direct reporting unit as well, straight to either the CEO or even like a chief of staff function where they have got the eyes and ears of, that top level leadership, simply because when you look at, going back to what Ben was just talking about, when you look at the number of organizations that DE&I, what they touch and they affect, absolutely, to put them in HR, I've always felt kind of makes them almost like a redheaded stepchild because, the focus is so lost by the time you get any of the initiatives out. When if you kind of look at some of the problems that stem from not having that focus or not having that attention, they end up costing these companies a lot of money. So I've always felt that it should not be in there. It should be sort of like ethics, legal within that, family of function. So yeah, definitely out of HR.
All right. Look, Tony said, make that supplier DE&I happen. He's on it. He said, go for it.
Yeah.
All right. Lucy, what say you? I know you have a strong opinion. Yes.
So first, this topic is hot, and I've gone to many summits, conversations around this topic. Enough for me to feel like I've formed my clear thought around it. And I want to start out with Ben. I want you to be my friend as well. And everything I say about HR, I don't feel like it applies to you.
I don't take it personally.
Okay. So just starting off there.
Ben, what you said was, I'm about to light this on fire. Don't get mad at me.
So on the topic of HR and DEI, the way it comes down to is HR for many years did not have to learn anything about DE&I. And we know this. That was not a requirement, right? And it's still not a requirement for most cases. I think mainly in California and maybe some places in New York, they would like you to have DE&I training. It's preferred. Maybe some firms would say strongly preferred, but still not a requirement. I know SHRM now wants you, like, will offer DE&I training, but that was not a thing. So most HR folks don't have DE&I training. They do it, if they do it, it's just out of their own personal interest. I know in my personal experience, I have a lot of HR friends, and I've offered them, like, anytime I have a DE&I training that I'm attending or webinar, I'll say, hey, this is happening. Do you want to come? Doesn't really take place most of the time. So, and especially if they're outside of California. And thinking about that, now a lot of folks are looking for remote jobs. You can have someone that's outside of a state that prefers DE&I training for HR. A person that's not trained in it, doing remote work for it. So, and thinking about that, HR's responsibility is to the company. And that's just being straightforward, honest. At the end of the day, when things go wrong, HR's duty, responsibility legally is to the company. Yes, we have the words human resources in there, but at the end of the day, HR is meant to protect the company. And I've seen it time after time. When things go wrong, HR will protect the company from legal perspective and be very careful with tiptoeing around it. However, DE&I's hopefully main priority is diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's not necessarily going to be priority company. That's going to be enforcing and ensuring that there is diversity, equity, inclusion, which most of the time should line up with the interests of the staff, and hopefully that would also line up with the interest of the company. And in my opinion, those don't really click with each other, especially if you have an HR person that's not trained in DE&I. If you have a DE&I department under HR, that doesn't make sense. How is someone that's not trained in DE&I supposed to manage or hold a department that they're not trained in? Yes, there's great HR folks that are trained in it, but that's not the norm right now. My thought process is yes, CEO, yes, chief of staff. Also, other suggestions are the board. Another suggestion is having internal equity and inclusion committee, or the work groups, or the resources, and having the DE&I manager report back to them. So having this kind of circle. There's different ways of putting that together and having kind of this circle of responsibility. But at this point, HR as a whole is not ready to take on DE&I. And that's the honest truth. Because of the way the HR is set, because of the responsibilities of HR and who it reports to, and what the responsibilities of it, and also what Ben was suggesting about the resources piece of it, and I didn't even think of that, and I think that's also absolutely true. My opinion is would not make sense, would not work, and from the HR folks that have come across, most of them didn't have an opinion or didn't know what DEI even stood for.
Wow.
Yeah. Fortunately, like the network of LinkedIn folks that I have are great, and in the HR world are great, and are really striving to change that. But I think we're really far from HR fully catching up to that. And I think because of the way companies build up that role right now, HR can't do that. So yeah, that's my opinion.
So you said a lot there, but what I want to nail home for you is this particular idea. It's not just that HR does not have the training, because I don't want anybody to leave this episode thinking that, oh, what we can do is we can make sure we have a really good trained DE&I person in
It's
human
not just that.
resources.
Yeah.
Right. That's not going to be the answer. And the reason why that is not the answer is because they actually have two different goals.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Conflicting. Yep.
completely different goals. Quite frankly, I think the human resources department of today should more likely be named personnel logistics, because
Yep.
that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about, checking off the boxes and making sure that things are organized appropriately so that the company doesn't get in trouble. And we want, training and benefits and payroll to go smoothly. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the bulk of HR has been about. It has not been, or it has not grown into, human capital.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Even though we would love it to be about human capital, that piece of human resources has been neglected. And so, quite frankly, I wouldn't call the diversity and inclusion department or wing of the company diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would just call it human capital management. That's what I would call it, because that is the greatest resource of an organization. Now,
And
we
it
are
gives you more
wrapping up.
latitude to do other things.
Yes,
Yeah. Because the
absolutely.
D&I professional has so much more to bring to the table, but the minute that they want to crawl out of that DE&I box, it's like they're, get back in the box. The
Mm-hmm.
first thing that, a lot of times what you hear is, oh, this is not a racial issue.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd that come from? That's not what DE&I is about. There's so much more
Mm-hmm.
to that. But going back to what you're saying, Lucy, it's such a misunderstood term that nobody really kind of knows what folks do over, in that sandbox. But they think they do.
So you are getting us to our last point, and I'm going to ask each of you to just answer this question, and then we'll close it out. We have to leave the water cooler and go back to work, guys. we have to do that. But this is the question. Why do you think white men feel left out of the DE&I equation?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. Why do you think white men feel left out of the DE&I equation? They're not left out. It is for them. They are a part of the process. They are a part of the solution, and they are part of those who should be benefiting. And I'm going to tell you, if white men are not benefiting from the DE&I process at your company, you are doing it wrong. DE&I is about lifting everybody on the tide, not about leaving someone behind. That is the purpose of DE&I. But I am well aware that white men almost either A, feel left out of the equation, or B, feel attacked within the equation. And so why do you think that is? Anybody want to go first?
I can go. Sean?
Yes. Let's hear it.
Okay.
Wait.
Two quick points.
I'm going to make this really bad. We have one white man, Ben.
I'll
No,
start.
I'm going to say that. Let's say we'll say Ben the last. Yeah.
It does not matter to me.
Yeah,
I'm going to chime in either way.
Yeah.
Go
So
for it, Sean.
first, there's two quick points that I'd like to make. Number one, I would venture to say, because in a lot of cases, because they are left out of the conversation. I look at a lot of, having, led a lot of ERG, employee resource groups, their conversations. When I walk in, the first thing that I have seen is, I'm like, well, wait a minute, where are all white folks at? Like, we just can't have this conversation with the non-people of color. I get that, this is the group that we're trying to serve, but here's what happens. It goes back to what I think you said what I said on the last episode. We have to bring them along incrementally so that they feel that they are part of the entire process. And we owe that to them, because, I had wrote something down on a previous sheet of paper. Here's my wish. What my wish is that every leader, who has to supervise, lead, or equip, Black folks in the workplace to survive and thrive, what I would wish is that they would take a field trip and go to a Black church. That would blow their mind and change their perception on how Black people operate and what they view as, important. Because it's such an experience, because you really get to see so many different facets of their life. Now, I mean, we're laughing about it, but I'm serious. I think about it even when I go home, back to my home church. It's like, man, like, it's a totally different world. But you kind of see the socialization of a person and how their value systems and their perceptions, are raised. You kind of see, okay, this is why they get excited, on the job. This is sometimes, why, they may talk a little loud or things like that. But I'm serious, we kind of laughing about it, but I always say, I would just love to take every lead on the field to a Black church, let them sit there for 2 hours. Their whole perspective on leading Black people or people of color would totally change. But going back to what I was saying, they are left out of that conversation, because a lot of times we forget to extend that invitation, knowing that at the end of the day, they're the key decision maker. So, and going back to why do they feel attacked? Because it goes back to, Alex, I'm a big Stephen Covey fan, and one of the things he talks about is first seek to understand before being understood. So, when I walk into a room where I'm uncomfortable, I'm already on guard. So all of a sudden, it becomes when we have our grievances, because these grievances have been held for so long, they don't come out, in a normal tone or without emotion. So again, we're talking about, the misinterpretation sometimes of emotions. It's not so much as anger, it is the pain and frustration of, in some years, in some cases, decades of frustration of, I just want to be heard. I just want to be understood. I just want somebody to say, hey, you know what? I understand exactly what you're talking about. And let's see how I can become a better ally for your success. Not, hey, well, wait a minute. I got my book here and it says that our diversity numbers, that we're hitting, we're hitting our numbers. I don't understand. What do you people want? It's sort of the message that comes off. So, definitely, yes, a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, we forget to invite the right people. It goes back to raising your kids. How many times your kids come up with the greatest plan and never ask you anything first until it came time to bear the cost? And sometimes we take that same mentality on the job. We come up with these great plans, never bringing the key decision makers in at the beginning so they can see how this cake is baked. And they have, because remember, we try to create buy-in. Remember this whole change? What we're trying to do is we're trying to embark on the greatest change management in the history of our workforce. So creating that felt need for change is what we have to do. Invite them in early. Sometimes we don't invite them in because there's a certain level, going back to a certain level of distrust. So we're not going to bring you in early. Some of it is an ambush. We kind of want to get you on your heels because we feel like we can run downhill and get more accomplished. The same way it goes on the other side. Leadership's not always forthcoming. When do they let the workforce know when something's going to happen? after they have, pretty much gone and figured out this is going to be their reaction, we're going to be ready for it. So, that's one of the things that I want to talk about was, sometimes they are. And then again, we need to change that mindset to where, folks are coming to that meeting, so to speak, with an open mind and letting, those things come to them and giving them time to kind of digest it. So, and then also getting the right advocates for, those improvements that we seek. So.
I like it. I like it. Okay, Ben, what say you? What is your last words at the water cooler?
Last words of the water cooler. I would say that in general, white men do not get involved in this because they don't know where to start. They're not sure where to start, right? They're just not. They want some help. And I can't speak for everyone else. It's not comfortable, and we all know that. Is it worthy? Yes. Is it worthwhile? Yes. Is it comfortable? Probably not if you're doing it right. Like Sean was saying, it's probably not going to be this, let's all hold hands and sing together. Maybe later, but initially it's going to be some tough conversations. I have personally, I can speak for myself, have been seeing and meeting with a coach on a regular basis this year to help me understand privilege, help me understand how I can impact in the sphere I'm in, right? I can't change the entire world, if only. I can't help in every possible way, but within the bubble that I'm in, what can I do? How can I impact? And one of the questions she asked me that I would encourage, if you're listening to this, you're a white man or woman, and you're like, I want to help, and I'm not sure how. Think about this. She asked me, if the world was more equitable, just snap our fingers and we could make that so, how would I benefit from that? And I'm going to tell you, I was stumped on that for a little while. I thought about it and I kept turning over my head, like, what's going to change? And eventually I realized, like, the thing that's going to change is that the world is going to benefit from greater humanity. Right? Just like we went back earlier talking about, let's call this something else besides diversity and put in their closet. Let's call it human, because we're all human. And one of the things that I came away with from that was, in art and music and science and innovation and business, everything that my life touches and that the lives of my kids and my family would be better and more human if the world was more equitable. And I think thinking about that question yourself, thinking through what would change, how that would impact your life, and then once you've done that, you'll see the vision and you can start taking steps towards making that a reality, building relationships with great people like the ones that I'm hanging out with today. So this has been such a blessing, but also looking for people in your own personal life, in your own work circles, things like that, to spend some time with and support and love on them and build some relationships. This whole conversation today has come full circle, right? Come back to build those relationships, have those conversations, and it may not be easy. It's likely not going to be easy, but it's worthwhile.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I like those final words because people really do have to know what's in it for me. I think we have to create a space where not just white men, not just women, not just Black men or people of color in general, but everyone as a collective understands the benefit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, aka human capital management, or should I say hashtag, because that's how we say it these days. Hashtag human capital management. There, we have so much more for you on this subject matter. Come back for the next episode in this series on diversity, equity, and inclusion, family. I promise you'll leave better for it. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye for now. I think Marco's going to come back.
Hello.
There he is.
A really insightful conversation. I think the next one will be in the December 16th, right, Erica?
Yes. Yes, you are correct.
So stay tuned because we'll be back.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.